Solos is one of the most beloved game modes in Fortnite competitive history, giving players of every skill level a chance to prove themselves in the competitive scene, and for some it's even a shot at the biggest prize pools Fortnite has ever seen. Now in Chapter 6 Season 4, Solos returns again, this time as the Solo Series, a $120,000 tournament with 6 open qualifiers and 1 set lobby final, and while I was watching those first few weeks, I couldn't help but feel motivated to compete myself. I saw pros running through lobbies like it was nothing, dropping 20, 30 or even 40 eliminations, making solos look incredibly easy. So that got me thinking. My builds and edits are actually better than the average professional player. I've managed to get top 20 in numerous solo rank cups. Heck, even Fredoxy has managed to do well and he can barely triple edit. So how hard could it be? Really hard, like insanely hard. So hard in fact that I ended up getting my worst competitive placement of all time, with my first attempt at the solo series ending in an abysmal disaster. But on this channel, we don't let things like that halt our progress. In fact, just minutes after my worst tournament of all time, I was straight to work planning the comeback. A 7-day grueling practice routine designed to elevate every aspect of my gameplay to the next level. A training routine so intense, it would let me skyrocket my solo placement in just a single week. This is the comeback. Subscribe, I'm trying to reach 10k by the end of the year. To start day 1, I wanted to establish a mechanics training routine. This would be something that I could do at the start of every day, with the goal of improving my in-game mechanics across the 7 days. And every good mechanics training routine has to start with aim training. Using Raiders Mechanics Training V5, I planned on warming up my aim before doing anything else. This would make sure my mouse control was as consistent as possible across the 7 days. I could also select exactly which aspects of aiming I struggled with, from long-range tracking to mid-range tracking and then most importantly, shotgun aim. My shotgun aim was something that I really struggled with in my first attempt at the solo series, so this was a big focus for the week. The plan was to do aim training and mechanics training V5 for around 30 minutes a day until my aim felt fully warmed up. Then transitioning into headshot only box fights to keep improving my shotgun aim. Doing this for 10 minutes would also start to warm up my builds and edits, which I hadn't touched yet in the routine. I would then jump back into mechanics training V5 to work on the piece control tunnels. I believe doing these awkward edits every day is a really good way to get warmed up, before having some fun doing some freeboarding in my new zero delay nothing but 1v1's creative map. Seriously, the delay in this map is insane, you should try it. And with that, my mechanics will be fully warmed up and ready for the day. Now, for day 1, I had something very important I needed to do, hit Unreal. My plan was to use the 2 rank cups on days 2 and 3 to get some good practice for the solo series, and by hitting Unreal that would ensure the players were as good as possible. And with just 30% left to Unreal, it was time for some quick W King to start the day. Bro, what? There's no way that kid's champion. Get out. Bro, what are you doing? No, if I hit that shot. Yeah, not my craziest showing, but still some good practice. It was then time for something very important, choosing a drop spot. This was one of my biggest issues in my first attempt at the solo series, where I landed at this crab at the start of the tournament and then abandoned that for Shining Span toward the end. I needed somewhere that had really good loot, yet enabled me to play somewhat passive because my confidence fighting in game isn't that great. And after VOD reviewing some pros, I came across Karama. Karama is a French controller player who is very good at being consistent in solos. He managed to get second the previous week from this drop spot, a small house on the right side of the map. Now, at a glance, this spot doesn't look that crazy. Yeah, it's got some decent loot, but there's nowhere obvious to farm metal, which in solos is a big priority. That is, until you start farming the bottom of the house. Wait, all of this is actually metal? Yeah, turns out you can actually farm 500 metal from the bottom of the house alone, which meant this small drop was actually really good for the current solo meta. So this is what I went with, planning to land here for the rest of the week. And a great way to get some practice at the spot before the ranked cup on day 2 was landing here a ton in solo ranked. I actually ended up playing nearly 3 hours of solo ranked, landing here to practice my off spawn and then running at the first person I could see after leaving the spot. This allowed me to practice fighting people off spawn and learn the optimal loot routes so that I could exit the spot as quickly as as possible. Kurama tends to loot the chests and floor loot spawns first, before farming his metal and making it into zone, so I tried my best to copy this approach. And as the hours went by, I was actually getting pretty good at landing here. The main focus for day 2 was the Unreal Ranked Cup. This would be the best way of seeing whether this drop spot would be good enough for the solo series at the end of the week, and after doing my mechanics training routine just before the tournament, it was time to see how much difference day 1 had actually made. Everyone's a default. God damn it, Fortnite. This is because there was a bug where your skins weren't saving in your locker. Don't worry, I wasn't banned on an alt account, we're okay. Coming into game 1, I actually wanted to try and go for a W key game, since everybody in my comments thinks I can W key like Peterbot. And well, these first 2 games were certainly some good reasoning for why I don't tend to W key everyone in tournaments like this. So for game 3, I was looking to regain some consistency, playing for endgame just like I planned to do in the solo series, and this actually worked. Nice. Game 4 was certainly a lesson learned. I was contested off spawn, which I won, but after getting W keyed in the mid game, I learned exactly why you shouldn't underestimate your opponents. What? Yeah, after seeing this man not even able to do a double edit, that caught me so off guard I didn't even know how to react. Never underestimating anybody ever again, fair play. But in game 5, I could already see how much playing ranked had helped with my off spawn. Actually getting 3 kills off spawn, which I was pretty happy about. I then ended up getting W keyed in the mid game. Get absolutely spat on. I was indeed pretty happy with that. And then I got to watch this man build the biggest base I've ever seen in a tournament. Yep, totally necessary for a 7 alive 5th zone in the solo ranked cup. I wish I had that kind of passion. This game then ended up being a pretty underwhelming 4th, but managed to place us nicely inside of the top 50. And then this tournament took a turn for the worst. Kind of, not really. After dying in 44th in game 6, I thought we had lost our momentum. But in game 7, I actually managed to get a 1 kill win. Yeah, I know, not very exciting. Just playing a perfect endgame on high and then killing the final player. This was great for our placement, but the rest of the tournament ended up being very mid, with a couple more top 5s and then another death in the mid game, ending the first of the 2 ranked cups in 33rd overall, pretty decent. But if I wanted to do well in the solo series at the end of the week, we're going to need to do a lot better than that. To start day 3, I did something super important after any tournament. I VOD reviewed my gameplay. Yes, this was incredibly boring, but after an hour or so, it gave me a good list of things I needed to improve on. I could then alter my mechanics training routine accordingly, focusing on parts of my aim I struggled with. Something I feel I lack is simply experience fighting in game. Coming from a more creative warrior background, I really haven't had that much time just playing the normal game against good players. So for my main focus on day 3, I did another 3 hours of solo ranked. As the VOD reviewing would also give me some clear things to work on when W keying. I managed to get some really good practice off spawn, and then tried to fight the players with the medallion later in the game. Although dying to these players is incredibly demotivating, they are almost always the best players in the lobby, so it turned out to be good practice. This meant that I was feeling a lot more confident going into the second rank cup, hoping to get a much better placement than on day 2. And when I say I think I've mastered being consistent from this spot, I mean it. Cue the montage. With an average placement of only 4.5, yes just 4.5, this meant that I finished in 16th place on the leaderboard, by far my best placement of all time. Across the next 4 days leading up to the solo series, there weren't any more tournaments I could use to practice. This meant my sole focus was to improve my fighting as much as humanly possible. So I got to work, grinding as hard as I possibly could, starting with a ton of ranked practice following VOD reviewing the ranked cup. Then grinding out reload ranked, dropping 20 bomb after 20 bomb, putting in hour upon hour of creative practice in build fights, realistics and zone wars, and finally finishing my 7th day of mechanics training just before the solo series started at the end of the week. As I clicked ready up for my first game of the tournament, all I could think about was one final question: had this grueling 7-day training routine actually worked? Coming into game 1, my goal for the tournament was to get at least 200 points. Now I know this still wouldn't be that great, but considering in my first attempt I only managed 136, that would be a huge improvement and we need to keep the goal realistic. However, we went off to the greatest of starts, as I was outdropped by someone contesting me off spawn, but I wasn't too worried because I had practice for this, landing at a small dock not far from the normal drop, where I managed to find some decent loot and then rotated into Storm to loot the remains of the First Order base. This POI is so big that it rarely gets fully looted in solos, leaving me plenty of loot to make a comeback in Storm, and after a while of looting up I was actually looking pretty stacked, ready for the endgame. Until I got tagged for 30 damage while rotating towards Deadside. Now initially I didn't think much of it, a single tag from miles away, there's no way he W keys me. Nope, completely wrong, this is Solos we're talking about. This gave him the perfect reason to W key me, and after wasting almost all of my hard mats trying to play defensive, I ended up going down in 29th, just missing out on the endgame. This meant that coming into game 2, despite being contested off spawn yet again, I needed to get a good game to start off the tournament.
Get out. Wow, no way he got away. Oh, I got the kill. Nice. Oh! Wow, I don't know how he got in my box.
Not the greatest game, just a 3-kill 8th place, but considering that was my first ever time using the mask to rotate in an endgame, I think I did pretty decent. Thanks Fortnite for changing the meta completely just a couple of days before the tournament, very helpful. Unfortunately, this was where the tournament started to go slightly downhill. I was contested yet again in game 3 and went down off spawn. Then game 4 ended up being decent but not amazing, having the same problem getting outdropped off spawn but recovering nicely in Storm, before getting an extremely free refresh as someone walked into my bush in the mid game. Yeah, sorry not sorry. This then allowed me to build an enormous base, the guy from Ranked would be so proud, luckily pulling the next couple of zones, saving a huge amount of mats. Unfortunately, as I was rotating the first few moving zones, my lack of experience with the mask started to show, as I teleported into a risky place and ended up going down in 17th. This wasn't great, but considering we were aiming for 200 points, we were well on track to make it there. Until I had some of the most annoying games of Fortnite I've ever played. Although I seem to be contested in every game this tournament, I still managed to make it off spawn in most of my games, just lacking the ability to make it all the way to the endgame. Getting 2 31sts in a row, just missing out on first moving when I was completely stacked ready for a good endgame. But regardless, I kept pushing on, and with just 2 games left, I had already beaten my 136 points from before and was hoping to break that 200 point mark by the end of the tournament. Game 8 started pretty decent, I got some good loot as usual and then came out of the storm ready for the endgame. On a dodgy rotate, I ended up hitting a guy hard, but unfortunately missed an edit and couldn't quite get the kill. This meant I needed to use a lot of mats trying to get into zone, and after struggling to find an easy refresh from moving zones, I unfortunately got 1 pumped in 19th, just 17 points off 200. However, coming into my last game, luck was finally on my side, as I was uncontested for the first time in the tournament. Getting some good loot off spawn and then setting up in a base waiting for endgame. By the time I made it into moving zones, I was starting to feel much more confident using the master rotate, meaning I had one final shot at a good endgame to finish the tournament. Yeah, unfortunately I couldn't quite get that cone place to get out of the box, and then Fortnite wouldn't let me pick up the ramen, so I died to Storm in 8th. Not the greatest game, but it allowed me to finish the tournament with 230 points. Nearly 100 more than the previous week, showing that the 7 days of practice had helped me improve massively. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.